This presentation is a group project about oil in the Sudan and South Sudan region, created by Therese LaForge, Griffin Selby, Preston Galatis, and Wes Winters, petroleum engineering undergraduate students in Petty 1010. This presentation will discuss a brief history of the area, how oil production shifts the economy, basic geographic settings of the area, and a basic summary of how oil is produced and future plans for the region.
There are two main civil wars that occurred in the Sudan region. The first civil war was from 1955 to 1972. The British government had administered Sudan until 1946. After this, in 1946, Sudan tried to create their own government. Tensions between the north and south regions of Sudan rose as they tried to create their own government. The Sudan Defense Forces rebelled, and protesters protested against the government to separate north and south. This rebellion was put down by the Addis Ababa Agreement, and the civil war ended in 1972. The second civil war occurred from 1983 to 2005. The cause of this was when Sudan violated the Addis Ababa Agreement by accessing oil fields that the South Sudan had claimed. During this time as well, they lost the United States support because Sudan supported Saddam Hussein in the Gulf War. This civil war in 2005 ended by the peace treaty signed in 2005 that decided to split oil revenues between the South and the North. In 2011, South Sudan finally became independent from Sudan. The split in 2011, as the presentation will talk about on, caused a major decrease in oil production. Prior to the split, they were the second largest oil producer outside of OPEC. The South gained 3/4 access to the oil fields, and $11 billion of exports went down to $1.8 billion. The first attempt to discover oil in Sudan actually occurred in 1954 when an Italian company went to the region to search for oil but was unsuccessful. Chevron invaded the area in 1978 and actually discovered oil in the Abu Jabar area. Chevron stayed in Sudan from 1978 to 1992 and spent $800 million on digging wells, but was essentially unsuccessful in gathering any oil from the region. Some of the problems that ensued Chevron's stay were tribes and ethnic wars that caused violence in the area. Ultimately, what caused Chevron to pull out was having 3 workers killed on site by rebels in the area. There's no natural gas in Sudan or South Sudan, as they don't consume or produce it. So Chevron is focused on just having oil, but as said earlier, it was unsuccessful. Most of the oil fields are on the border of what is now in South Sudan. So dispute over who has control over the oil fields has been a long-running battle between the two countries, and because of this, caused the violence in the area. The United States helped support Chevron and South Sudan independence through the years, but even with support from the U.S., Chevron was unsuccessful. Sudan is an authoritarian state where all the power is obtained by a president and the ruling National Congress Party. The law is based on Islamic Sharia law, and death is still ensued by stoning. In fact, from 2009 to 2012, there are several reports of executions by stoning. It is a pretty violent country, as examples such as this. South Sudan is a mixed presidential system with a national legislature that has 2 houses, which is the Assembly and the Council of States. The first president after South Sudan gained independence, Salva Kiir Mayardit, is actually very good friends with George W. Bush, the former president of the United States. George W. Bush gave him a gift, which is a cowboy hat, and he can actually be seen wearing this in most pictures of the first president. This is just an example of the open relationship between America and South Sudan. The lifestyle is tough in both countries, as Sudan gives free education, but only 70% of the population is literate. There is constant food crises and water crisis in the area, and in Sudan, ethnic wars between different ethnicities causes violence in the area and makes it tough for foreign companies to set up production facilities as they are scared of violence and dampers to the region's production. Another problem South Sudan faces is the electricity problem. Only 1% of the population is connected to the power grid, and electricity is very poor. They're actually the second lowest consumer of electricity in Africa, which is a pretty staggering statistic. The problem with electricity is it causes frequent blackouts that can last from days to weeks, causing the oil production facilities to shut down and be inoperable.
Prior to the 2011 split, Sudan's economy relied heavily on the oil industry. In fact, 60% of Sudan's total government revenue came from oil in 2010, and at this time, Sudan was ranked the second largest African oil producer. Sudan also helps supply oil to major countries such as China, Japan, India, and South Korea. Despite this success, Sudan's extreme reliance on this industry proved to be detrimental to the overall economy. After the split, South Sudan gained control of 3/4 of the oil, and Sudan's oil revenue fell from $11 billion to $1.8 billion. Because of this huge loss, Sudan's economy suffered greatly. On the contrary, this initial oil surplus was a great stepping stone for the new country of South Sudan. Instead of learning from Sudan's mistakes, however, South Sudan built their economy around oil production and allowed oil revenue alone to comprise 98% of total government revenues. As seen in the table, this would eventually be harmful to South Sudan's economy as oil production begins to decline in 2012. Since the 2011 split and Sudan's major economic loss, the country has begun to diversify their sources of income. Sudan began to explore agriculture and mining, and today they export gold, cotton, sesame, livestock, and many other things in addition to oil. The economy of South Sudan has declined in the past years, as seen in the table. This decline is due to civil unrest in the country and a dependence on Sudan to export oil. Civil unrest in South Sudan has forced them to stop production several times in the past and continues to be an issue. Also, South Sudan's production efficiency is limited by Sudan due to the fact that Sudan controls all existing pipelines.
Although the majority of the proven reserves in the Sudan and South Sudan area are located in South Sudan, almost all refining takes place in Sudan. 5 refineries that are located in this region are Khartoum, Port Sudan, El Obeid, Sharjah, and Abu Ghraib. These are all located in Sudan. However, South Sudan is making plans to become less dependent on Sudan, with 2 proposed refineries in Unity State and Upper Nile. The issue that leads to the disruption of the oil industry in the region is the fact that the pipelines that carry the oil to a port in the Red Sea must go through Sudan, while the oil reservoirs are located in South Sudan. The major pipelines are Petrodar and the GNPOC pipeline. To fix this issue, and so that South Sudan can become less reliant on Sudan, they propose 2 pipelines, one that will finish in Djibouti and another that will finish in Kenya, so that they can be shipped from a place other than the Red Sea and take Sudan out of the process. The Mughlad Basin is the first of 2 rift basins that contain the majority of the proven oil reserves in Sudan and South Sudan. First major oil field in the Mughlad Basin is Unity Field, located in Unity State. This field is split between the borders of Sudan and South Sudan, which causes many issues in the region. Unity Field's reservoir is a sandstone with a faulted anticline trap. This field produces a Nile blend, which is a medium, low-sulfur, waxy crude oil. Another major field in this basin is the Heglig Field, also split between the borders. It was recently captured by South Sudan. The president of Sudan has recently claimed that he will recover this field. The Malieb Basin is the second basin that contains the oil reservoirs in Sudan and South Sudan. Major structures or dominant structures in this area are anticlines and normal fault blocks. The Great Palog Field, which is operated by the Dar Petroleum Operating Company, produces a Dar blend. This is a heavy, sour crude oil. This field's got about 900 million barrels of proven reserves. The Yabas Formation is the main reservoir, and that is a sandstone reservoir.
Oil production in Sudan and South Sudan is affected as much or more by political circumstances than by geological limitations. Some exploration was done beginning in the 1950s, but slow progress was made due to civil unrest in Sudan. Production began in the mid-1990s and began producing very well after several years. As you can see, the Sudan oil production chart made in 2008 projects that the production would peak at nearly 600,000 barrels per day in 2011. Based on explored fields, the oil production was projected to decline to low levels by 2030. Furthermore, this chart was made before the split between Sudan and South Sudan in 2011 and does not account for the resulting drastic drop-off of oil production, which is present in the more current graph of the oil production in Sudan and South Sudan from 1980 to 2013. In fact, since the 2011 drop-off, oil production stayed below the IMF projections and reservoirs could run out sooner than projected. The major reason more exploration hasn't been done is because of the political and civil turmoil in the region along with the dangers associated with it. In order for more oil exploration to occur, the Sudan region will have to become more peaceful. If this happens, potentially more oil reserves in the region could be located and there could be a much-needed rise in oil production again. However, if this fails to happen, oil production will continue to dwindle until the wells stop producing, possibly within the next few decades. In the meantime, it could possibly be beneficial for Sudan and South Sudan to start producing the natural gas that they pump out with the oil rather than flaring it or re-injecting it.
The presentation was created by 4 students in Petty 1010 as undergraduate students in the Craft and Hawkins Petroleum Engineering School at LSU to better understand Sudan's and South Sudan's role in the international oil industry. They were at one time very large producers but have declined, and through our research have found the reasons they declined, which was after the split in 2011, and through Sudan and South Sudan can better understand why a country might lose production in oil even though they are deemed to be fit to produce very large quantities of oil.